The sound of poker chips clicking always preceded Kong Minjun's arrival, a rhythm like a rattlesnake's warning before the strike. Naomi Rivers had learned to recognize it over 8 years of serving drinks at the Velvet Lotus Casino. She'd perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight, becoming invisible while carrying trays of top-shelf whiskey through forests of men who looked through her, never at her. Tonight, Minjun arrived in a foul mood. His navy silk shirt was wrinkled. The tiger tattoo coiling up his neck seemed darker than usual. 5 suited enforcers flanked him as he dropped into his chair at table 7, his jaw tight with barely contained rage. A deal had gone wrong. Everyone could feel it. Naomi approached with his usual whiskey, eyes down, movements careful. She set the glass on the table just as Minjun's associate said something in Mandarin that made him angrier. Minjun grabbed his drink, and as Naomi turned to leave, he muttered to his man in Korean, sharp, dismissive, vicious. Why does this black bitch keep crawling around? The casino noise continued. No one understood. No one cared. Except Naomi froze. She turned back slowly, leaned down until her face was level with his, and smiled like broken glass. Gesanoji, she said in perfect Seoul dialect. The bastard is you. The entire poker table went silent. Cards stopped mid-shuffle. Chips froze in dealers' hands. Minjun's associates went rigid, hands instinctively moving toward concealed weapons. Minjun stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and then something far more dangerous. The cold calculation of a predator who just discovered his prey was something else entirely. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with crushing force before she could step back. For 3 seconds that felt like hours, he studied her face. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling her heart race. Then, without a word, he released her. His smile was slow, deliberate, and didn't reach his eyes. "You're dismissed," he said in English, his tone almost pleasant. He turned back to his cards as if nothing had happened, picking them up with steady hands. For tonight. Naomi stumbled back, her wrist burning where he'd gripped it. She forced herself to walk, not run, back toward the bar, feeling his eyes tracking her every step. When she glanced back, Minjun was leaning toward one of his men, whispering something while keeping his gaze locked on her retreating form. The man nodded once and slipped away from the table. Naomi's hands shook as she set down her empty tray. She'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or perhaps she'd finally stopped hiding. Either way, Kong Minjun now knew she existed. And men like him never forgot a mystery they needed to solve. Naomi's shift ended at 2:47 a.m. She clocked out, changed from her server uniform into jeans and a hoodie, and walked through the employee exit into the parking garage's fluorescent glare. Her Honda Civic waited in spot E27, right where she'd left it 12 hours ago. Her feet ached. Her face hurt from smiling. She was 3 steps from her car when she heard the footsteps. Not the usual shuffle of tired casino workers heading home. These were deliberate, coordinated. She'd heard them before. The night Jinwoo disappeared, men had moved exactly like this. Her hand dove into her purse for her keys, but strong fingers clamped around her wrist first. "Miss Rivers." The voice was polite, terrifyingly so. "Please don't make this difficult." She saw 3 of them. Black suits. Expressionless faces. The same men who'd flanked Minjun at table 7. She tried to scream, but a cloth pressed against her mouth and nose, chemical sweet and suffocating. Her vision tunneled. The concrete rushed up to meet her knees, except she never hit the ground. Someone caught her, lifted her like she weighed nothing. The last thing she heard was the rumble of an engine and the click of a car door locking. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments, silk sheets against her skin. The smell of sandalwood and something sharper? Whiskey, maybe. Her head throbbed. She opened her eyes to see floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the Las Vegas Strip far below, a river of neon bleeding into the night. She was on a bed in a penthouse that probably cost more per night than she made in 6 months. "You're awake." Naomi's head snapped toward the voice. Minjun sat in a leather chair 15 feet away, one leg crossed over the other, a crystal tumbler dangling from his fingers. He'd removed his jacket. The tiger tattoo seemed more alive in the soft lamplight, scales catching shadows. "What the fuck did you do?" Naomi's voice came out hoarse. She sat up too quickly, and the room tilted. "You kidnapped me?" "You can't." "I can." His tone was casual, like they were discussing the weather. "And I did." "We need to have a conversation, Miss Rivers." "About what?" "Me calling you a bastard." She forced steel into her voice despite her pounding heart. "Sorry I hurt your feelings." "About who taught you Korean?" Minjun leaned forward, his eyes, dark, unreadable, locked onto hers. "About why an American woman who serves drinks speaks Seoul dialect like she grew up in Gangnam. About why you have Busan street slang older than you are." He took a slow sip of whiskey. "You have two choices. Answer my questions willingly, or I'll find other ways to make you talk. I've been told I'm very patient." Naomi's hands clenched into fists in the expensive sheets. She said nothing. Minjun smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. I was hoping you'd choose the difficult path. This will be far more interesting." 3 days passed like a fever dream. Naomi woke each morning to find breakfast waiting on a marble table, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, coffee that probably cost more than her electric bill. She refused to touch it the first day. By the second, hunger won. Minjun never commented, just watched from across the penthouse with those calculating eyes, like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. He kept her in luxury that felt like a cage. The penthouse had everything. A bathroom larger than her apartment, closets filled with clothes in exactly her size, a view that made Las Vegas look like scattered diamonds. But the doors were locked. The windows didn't open. And Minjun's men stood outside, silent sentinels who appeared whenever she got too close to an exit. "You could make this easier on yourself," Minjun said on the third afternoon. He stood by the bar, pouring himself scotch. "Just tell me who taught you." "A name. That's all I need." Naomi sat curled on the leather sofa, arms wrapped around her knees. "And then what?" "You let me go." She laughed bitterly. "I'm not stupid." "No, you're not." He walked over, stopped just outside her personal space. Close enough to intimidate, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Which makes this more frustrating. You're protecting someone who clearly taught you a language you should know. Someone connected to my world. Your world. She met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "You mean the world where you kidnap women from parking garages?" Something flickered in his expression, not quite guilt, but close. "You made yourself interesting. That's dangerous." "Then maybe you should have ignored me." "Too late for that." The nights were worse. Or better. Naomi couldn't decide. Minjun apparently didn't sleep much. She'd wake at 2, 3 in the morning to find him standing by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights, drinking alone. On the fourth night, she couldn't stand the silence anymore. "Does it ever get exhausting?" she asked from the darkness of the bedroom doorway. He didn't turn. "What?" "Being you. Being feared." She walked toward him, barefoot on cold marble. "Everyone in that casino moves differently when you walk in. Like prey animals sensing a predator." "That's the point, is it?" She stopped beside him, looking down at the glittering strip. "Or is that just what you tell yourself, so the loneliness doesn't eat you alive?" Minjun's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, almost too quietly to hear, "You don't know anything about my life. I know what isolation looks like." Naomi surprised herself with the honesty. "I know what it's like to hide who you are because showing people the truth is too dangerous." He finally looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing past the server uniform he'd categorized her in. "Who taught you Korean?" "My father." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Not my biological one. The one who mattered." He'd put on old Korean films, the black and white ones from the 60s. We'd watch them together, and he'd teach me the words, the slang, the insults. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. Especially the insults. "What was his name?" Naomi's walls slammed back up. "That's enough truth for tonight." But Minjun had heard something in her voice, grief, maybe, or loss. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. He's dead. It wasn't a question. Naomi turned away from the window, from him, from the conversation that had already revealed too much. Good night, Mr. Kong. She didn't see the recognition beginning to dawn in his eyes. Minjun's phone buzzed at dawn on the 6th day. Naomi was still asleep, curled on the far side of the bed she'd been forced to share with the penthouse's only bedroom. He'd taken the couch every night, maintaining that thin veneer of civility between captor and captive. The message was from his head of intelligence. Asterisk found something. You need to see this. Asterisk 20 minutes later, Minjun sat at his desk, staring at a photograph that made his blood run cold. The image was grainy, pulled from immigration records dated 17 years ago. A Korean man in his 40s stood in an airport, his hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a young black girl, maybe 13, with braids and defiant eyes. The man was Jin-woo Park. The girl was unmistakably Naomi. The file his team had compiled was damning in its thoroughness. Jin-woo Park, former accountant for the Choi Syndicate in Seoul, disappeared from Korea 8 years ago after allegedly embezzling $3 million. Tracked to Los Angeles, then Las Vegas. Found dead in a Seoul alley 7 years and 11 months ago. Execution style, 2 bullets, the syndicate's signature. Minjun's syndicate. His uncle's order. He'd been 24, newly elevated, and he'd signed off on it without question. He looked at the photograph again, at the way Jin-woo's hand rested on that girl's shoulder, protective and gentle. At the way young Naomi leaned slightly toward him, trusting. What are you looking at? Minjun's head snapped up. Naomi stood in the doorway, wearing one of the silk robes from the closet, her natural hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes fixed on the photograph lying on his desk. She went absolutely still. Where did you get that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Minjun slowly turned the photo toward her. Jin-woo Park. Your father. It wasn't a question anymore. He raised you after your biological parents died in a car accident when you were 13. Adopted you, unofficially. Taught you Korean. Kept you hidden. He paused, weighing his next words. He worked for my organization in Seoul. He stole money and disappeared. He didn't steal anything. Naomi's voice shook with fury. Jin-woo was the most honest man I've ever known. He left Korea because she stopped, but too late. Because why? Minjun stood, moving around the desk. Because someone was after him? Because he knew something he shouldn't? Because people like you killed people like him for telling the truth? The words exploded from her. He came to America to protect me, to get us away from. Her voice broke. What did you do? What did your people do to him? Minjun felt something cold settle in his chest. We found him 8 years ago. In Seoul. He'd gone back for something, we never found out what. My uncle ordered his execution. He forced himself to hold her gaze. I authorized it. I signed the order. The room turned to ice. Naomi's face transformed, grief, rage, betrayal cycling through in seconds. She grabbed a crystal decanter from the bar and hurled it. Minjun dodged, and it shattered against the wall. You killed him. You murdered the only person who... A sob caught in her throat. He went back for me.
For my citizenship papers.
For the evidence he'd hidden. And you fucking killed him. I didn't know, Minjun started. You didn't care? She advanced on him, and he saw murder in her eyes. You didn't ask questions. You just pulled the trigger on a good man, because someone told you to. You're right. The admission stopped her mid-step. Minjun stood there, undefended, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost human. Almost breakable. I was young. Ambitious. I trusted my uncle. I killed a lot of people on his orders, Naomi. Your father was just another name on a list. He swallowed hard. If I could take it back. But you can't. Tears streamed down her face now. You can't bring him back. You can't undo 8 years of me wondering if I'd ever know what happened to him. They stood in the wreckage, broken glass, broken trust, broken people, both trapped by a past that refused to stay buried. Finally, Minjun spoke, his voice raw. What evidence? You said he went back for evidence. Naomi's laugh was bitter and broken.
Why?
So you can destroy that too?
No.
He met her eyes, and she saw something there she hadn't expected. Genuine remorse, and something darker.
Doubt.
So maybe we can finally learn the truth about what he died for. The drive to Henderson was silent except for the hum of Minjun's black Mercedes. Naomi sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, watching the desert landscape blur past. Two of Minjun's men followed in a second car. Insurance, he'd called it. She called it what it was. A leash. Unit 247, she said finally, breaking the silence. The code is 0-8-1-3. His birthday. Minjun's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Why are you showing me this? Because you're going to find out eventually. Your people are too thorough. She turned to look at him, her eyes hard. And because maybe, you'll finally understand what your family took from the world when they killed him. The storage facility was a sun-bleached maze of corrugated metal. Minjun dismissed his men with a curt gesture, and they disappeared like shadows. Naomi led him through the rows until they reached a unit near the back. Her hands trembled as she entered the code. The door rolled up with a metallic screech. Inside was a small space, meticulously organized. Filing boxes lined one wall. A laptop sat on a folding table, covered in dust. A locked safe crouched in the corner. But what caught Naomi's attention was the envelope taped to the laptop screen, her name written in Jean Woo's careful handwriting. She pulled it down with shaking hands. Inside was a key and a note. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. I'm sorry, little bird. The password is your mother's maiden name. Make them pay. Minjun watched as she powered up the laptop. It took 3 tries. The battery was nearly dead, and they had to use a backup power bank. When the login screen appeared, Naomi typed, Washington. The desktop bloomed with folders.
Dozens of them.
Financial records. Audio files. Photographs. Spreadsheets color-coded and cross-referenced. Minjun leaned closer, his face illuminated by the screen's glow, and Naomi watched the blood drain from his features as he began to comprehend what he was seeing. Jesus Christ, he whispered. The files were damning. Bank transfers from legitimate casino accounts into shell corporations. Property deeds for warehouses that didn't appear on any official records. Passenger manifests that showed women arriving from Southeast Asia, then disappearing into the desert. And at the center of it all, one name appeared again and again, Kong Dongmin, Minjun's uncle. He wasn't embezzling for himself, Naomi said, her voice hollow. He was running a trafficking network. Using your family's casinos as fronts. Jean Woo discovered it when he was auditing the books. She clicked on a video file. He recorded everything. Jean Woo's face filled the screen. He looked older than Naomi remembered, exhausted and frightened. The timestamp read 8 years and 2 months ago. My name is Park Jean-woo, he began in Korean, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. I am recording this testimony because I believe I will be killed before I can deliver it to authorities. For 3 years, I have served as accountant for the Kong family syndicate. 6 months ago, I discovered that Kong Dongmin has been operating a human trafficking operation through the Velvet Lotus Casino in Las Vegas and 3 other properties. Minjun's breathing had become shallow. Jean Woo continued, his words precise and devastating. He detailed the operation, how women were promised work visas and legitimate employment, then trapped in debt bondage. How they were moved through a network of warehouses and safe houses. How Dongmin used the casino's security and the family's connections to law enforcement to operate with impunity. How Jinwoo had tried to go to the FBI, but Dongmin had discovered his plans. I am leaving this evidence with my daughter, Naomi, Jinwoo said, and his voice finally cracked. I must return to Seoul to retrieve the original documents from my safety deposit box. If I don't return, I pray she will have the strength to finish what I started. I pray the Kong family will face justice. The video ended. Minjun stood frozen, his face ashen. My father knew, he said finally, so quietly Naomi almost didn't hear. He had to have known. He protected his brother. And I. His voice broke. I killed the one man trying to stop it. Naomi felt her hatred waver, just slightly, confronted with the devastation in his eyes. Your whole inheritance, she said. Your empire. It was built on their suffering. Minjun turned to her, and she saw something she never expected to see from a man like him. Tears. What do I do? He asked, sounding lost. How do I fix this? You can't fix it. Naomi closed the laptop with a sharp click. But maybe we can end it. The call came at 11:43 p.m., 7 days after they'd left the storage unit. Minjun had brought Naomi back to the penthouse, but something had fundamentally shifted. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was a co-conspirator. They'd spent days reviewing Jinwoo's files, building a timeline, identifying victims who might still be alive. Minjun had been quiet, methodical, his guilt manifesting as obsessive focus. When his phone rang, Naomi saw his expression change from concentration to horror in the space of a heartbeat. What? She asked, standing from the table where they'd spread documents. Minjun's voice was hoarse. The Velvet Lotus. There's been a fire. They made it to the casino in 12 minutes, Minjun's Mercedes screaming through red lights. But even from 2 blocks away, Naomi could see the orange glow against the night sky, could smell the acrid smoke that turned the desert air toxic. The casino was an inferno. Fire trucks surrounded the building, their hoses like futile threads against the blaze. Police had cordoned off the area, but Naomi pushed through anyway, Minjun close behind. She searched the crowd of survivors. Dealers in singed uniforms, security guards with soot-blackened faces, guests wrapped in emergency blankets. Jasmine. She grabbed a floor manager she recognized. Jasmine Chen, the cocktail server. Have you seen her? The woman's face crumpled. She was inside when it started. 3rd floor, VIP section. Naomi, I'm so sorry. The world tilted. Naomi felt Minjun's hand on her elbow, steadying her, but she couldn't breathe. Jasmine, who'd trained her 8 years ago. Jasmine, who brought her soup when she had the flu and covered her shifts when Jinwoo died. Jasmine, who had a 6-year-old daughter and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. How many? Minjun asked, his voice tight. 12 confirmed dead, a fire marshal said, approaching with a grim expression. 23 injured. We found accelerant residue. This wasn't an accident. Minjun's jaw clenched. Tommy Zhao. The marshal looked at him sharply, but said nothing. Everyone knew who Kong Minjun was. Everyone knew what this meant. In the car, Minjun made 3 calls in rapid Mandarin. Naomi understood enough to know he was mobilizing his people, preparing for war. When he finished, his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I'm going to burn his entire operation to the ground, he said flatly. Every building, every asset, every person who works for him. Tommy Zhao just signed his own death warrant.
No.
Naomi's voice cut through his rage like a blade. Minjun turned to her, incredulous. 12 people are dead. Your friend is dead. You want me to do nothing? I want you to think. She met his eyes, her own red-rimmed but fierce. If you go to war, more people die. Innocent people. The women your uncle trafficked, some of them might still be in Zhao's warehouses. If you start a gang war, they burn too. Then what do you suggest? His voice dripped with barely controlled fury. We used Jinwoo's evidence. Naomi pulled out her phone, pulled up a contact she'd saved days ago. Special Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Organized Crime Division. We give them everything. The trafficking network, the money laundering, the connections. We don't just kill Zhao. We dismantle the entire system. We make it so every corrupt cop, every complicit official, every bastard who looked the other way goes down with him. That will take months. Years. Then we take months. Naomi's voice broke, but her resolve didn't. Jasmine deserves better than just revenge. She deserves justice. Real justice. The kind that actually saves people. She grabbed his hand, forced him to look at her. Jinwoo died trying to do this the right way. Don't you dare dishonor both of them by turning into the same monster your uncle was. Minjun stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something in his expression shifted, from fury to something colder, more calculated, more dangerous. A clean war, he said finally. The only kind worth fighting. Naomi squeezed his hand once, then let go. Make the call. Get your lawyers. I'll contact the FBI. As sirens wailed behind them and smoke darkened the Vegas sky, two broken people chose truth over vengeance. It was the hardest choice either of them had ever made. The war room was Minjun's private office, transformed. Wall-mounted monitors displayed surveillance feeds, financial flowcharts, and organizational hierarchies. Red pins marked complicit individuals. Blue pins marked potential allies. Black pins marked the dead. There were too many black pins. Minjun stood before the largest screen, his sleeves rolled up, tie discarded hours ago. Kim Sung-ho, he said, pointing to a photograph. My uncle's right hand for 15 years. He knew everything. Then he's first. Naomi sat at the conference table, Jinwoo's laptop open before her, cross-referencing names against financial records. She'd barely slept in 3 days, running on coffee and cold fury. But we need his testimony. The FBI wants cooperating witnesses, not corpses. Kim won't cooperate. Then we give him a choice, 20 years in federal prison, or immunity for testimony. She looked up, her eyes sharp. Minjun, if you kill him, the case gets weaker. We need these men alive and talking. He turned to her, frustration evident in every line of his body. You're asking me to show mercy to men who trafficked women, who profited from their suffering. I'm asking you to be smarter than your rage. Naomi stood, walked to him. They'd been doing this dance for weeks now, pushing each other, challenging each other, neither willing to back down. Your uncle's network had 37 active members. Zhao's organization has 52. If we build airtight cases against all of them, they go away forever. Legal.
Clean.
No blowback. Minjun's laugh was bitter. You sound like a prosecutor. I sound like someone who spent 8 years watching these men operate. She pulled up another file. See this? Lee Jinho, pit boss at the Velvet Lotus. I served him drinks 3 times a week. He always tipped exactly 15%, always requested the same dealer, and always made a phone call at 10 p.m. She enhanced a surveillance photo. That dealer? She disappeared 6 months ago. Lee was recruiting for your uncle. Minjun leaned closer, studying the image. How did you? Because I paid attention. Because when you're invisible, you see everything. Naomi cycled through more photos, time-stamped, annotated, damning. I've been building this for years without even realizing it. Every face, every pattern, every anomaly. I just didn't know what I was looking at until Jinwoo's files gave me context. Something shifted in Minjun's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You're not a victim anymore. I never was. I was a survivor waiting for a reason to fight. She met his eyes, and the air between them crackled with something that had nothing to do with strategy. Are you going to let me? The space between them evaporated. Minjun's hand came up, cupped her jaw with surprising gentleness. You're the most dangerous woman I've ever met. Good. Her breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. You need dangerous right now. His thumb traced her cheekbone. If we do this, if we go all the way, there's no going back. The FBI, the trials, burning my organization from the inside. I'll lose everything. Not everything. Naomi's hand covered his. You'll lose the poison. What's left might actually be worth keeping. He kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle. It was weeks of tension, grief, and impossible chemistry compressed into a moment that felt like inevitability. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Naomi saw something in his eyes she'd never expected to see. Hope. Okay, Minjun said, his forehead resting against hers. We do it your way. We build the cases. We let the law have them. He pulled back slightly, his expression hardening with resolve. But Zhao is mine. Naomi smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut.
Ours.
Ours, he agreed. Behind them, the monitors glowed with the faces of men who thought they were untouchable. By morning, Agent Sarah Chun would have enough evidence to start issuing warrants. By the end of the week, Min Jun's organization would be half its size, purged of rot. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, Tommy Zhao was about to discover that the two people he'd underestimated most had just become his nightmare. The text came at 3 a.m. "I have something you want. Come alone or she burns." Coordinates attached. Zhao Minjun stared at the accompanying photo, a young woman bound to a chair, terror in her eyes. One of the trafficking victims they'd identified from Jinwoo's files. One they'd been trying to locate for weeks. "It's a trap," Naomi said, already pulling on her jacket. Obviously. Minjun was checking his gun, his movements precise and cold. "Which is why you're staying here." "Like hell I am." She held up Jinwoo's knife, the one she'd retrieved from the storage unit, its blade still sharp after 8 years. "He killed Jasmine. He's holding women prisoner. And you think I'm going to wait in your penthouse like some helpless? He'll kill you. He'll try." Naomi's smile was grim. "I spent 8 years being invisible to men like Tommy Zhao. He's seen me serve him drinks 50 times and never once looked at my face. That's my advantage." Minjun pulled her close, his hand tangling in her hair. "If anything happens to you, then you finish it." She kissed him hard, tasting desperation and determination. "But it won't. I'm not dying in the desert for that bastard's ego." The coordinates led to an abandoned meatpacking plant 40 miles outside Vegas. The sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Minjun's team had already alerted the FBI. Agent Chen and her tactical unit were 12 minutes out, waiting for the signal. They entered through the main bay door. The interior was a maze of rusted hooks, conveyor belts, and shadows. Tommy Zhao waited in the center of the kill floor, flanked by 6 armed men. The woman from the photo was there, still bound, along with 3 others, all terrified, all young. "Kong Minjun." Zhao's voice echoed in the cavernous space. "You've been a busy boy. 23 of my people arrested in 2 weeks. Very impressive." His smile was vicious. "But you forgot something. I still have friends in the DA's office. These women, they disappear, and your entire case falls apart." "Let them go, Zhao." Minjun's gun was steady, aimed at the other man's chest. "This is between us."
No.
Zhao's eyes slid past Minjun, finally landing on Naomi. "Wait, I know you. You're the drink girl." He laughed, genuinely amused. "You brought a waitress to a execution? That's sad, even for you." Naomi stepped forward, Jinwoo's knife hidden against her forearm. "You remember me? Should I?" Zhao's contempt was palpable. "You all look the same after a while. Interchangeable. Good." Naomi moved fast, faster than Zhao expected. She closed the distance in 3 strides, and when his nearest guard reached for her, she used his momentum against him, the way Jinwoo had taught her in their tiny apartment, when he'd still believed they might need to fight their way out one day. The guard hit the concrete hard. Zhao's gun came up, but Minjun fired first. The shot went wide deliberately, giving Naomi the opening she needed. She was on Zhao before he could adjust his aim, Jinwoo's knife at his throat. "You don't remember me," she said, her voice deadly calm, "but you remember the Velvet Lotus, don't you? You remember burning it. 12 people died. One of them was my best friend." The knife pressed deeper, drawing blood. "Her name was Jasmine Chen. Say it." Zhao's eyes were wide with fear now. All arrogance stripped away. "Jasmine Chen."
Good.
Naomi's hand trembled. It would be so easy. One quick slash, and the man who'd killed Jasmine would bleed out on this dirty floor. Justice delivered by her hand, the way Jinwoo never got to deliver it. But then she saw the women, still bound, still watching, still trapped in the nightmare men like Zhao created. She stepped back. "FBI," she shouted. "Now!" The doors exploded inward. Agent Chen's tactical team swarmed the warehouse, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in commanded authority. Zhao's men didn't even try to fight. They were outmanned, outgunned, and they knew it. As federal agents cuffed Zhao, he looked at Naomi with something like disbelief. You had me. You could have. I know. Naomi wiped Jinwoo's knife clean on Zhao's jacket. But my father didn't die for revenge. He died for justice. There's a difference. Minjun appeared at her side, his hand finding hers. Together, they watched as Tommy Zhao was read his rights and led away in handcuffs. The sun was fully up now, burning away the desert shadows. For the first time in 8 years, Naomi felt like she could breathe. The memorial garden opened on a Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year and 17 days after the fire. Naomi stood before the dedication plaque, reading the 12 names etched in bronze for the 100th time. Jasmine Chen's name was third from the top. Fresh flowers, white lilies, Jasmine's favorite, rested at the base. Every week for the past year, someone had brought new ones. Sometimes it was Naomi. Sometimes it was Jasmine's daughter, Maya, who came with her grandmother. Sometimes it was people Naomi had never met, casino workers who remembered a woman with a bright laugh and a generous spirit. The contractors say we're 3 weeks ahead of schedule, Minjun said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He traded his designer suits for jeans and button-downs most days now, though he still moved with that same controlled grace that had first made the casino floor go quiet. Naomi accepted the coffee, let the warmth seep into her hands. Jinwoo would be proud of this. She gestured to the construction behind them, the new velvet lotus rising from the ashes. The architecture was different now, all glass and light where before there had been shadows and secrets. Transparent. Literal transparency. Your idea. Minjun's arms settled around her waist, comfortable and familiar. They'd been living together for 8 months now, in a modest house in Henderson, far from the glitter of the Strip. Along with the employee profit sharing, the union recognition, and the on-site childcare. Well, you can't run a legitimate business like a criminal enterprise. She smiled, leaning into him. Turns out treating people with dignity is actually good for morale. The federal trials had been brutal and cathartic in equal measure. Tommy Zhao got 45 years. Kim Sung-ho, Minjun's uncle's right-hand man, had testified against 17 others in exchange for 20 years instead of life. The cases had spiderwebbed across Nevada, California, and Washington, exposing corruption in police departments, DA offices, and city halls. 73 arrests. 52 convictions so far, with more trials pending. Minjun's empire had been dismantled by his own hand. He'd sold off the underground gambling operations, the loan sharking networks, the protection rackets, everything that smelled of his uncle's poison. What remained were 3 legitimate casinos, a chain of restaurants, and a commercial real estate portfolio. Legal. Taxed. Boring. He'd joked once, though Naomi saw the relief in his eyes. The Jinwoo Park Foundation had opened 6 months ago, housed in a renovated building downtown. Naomi ran it with a staff of 12 social workers, lawyers, therapists, all dedicated to helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. The funding came from Jinwoo's recovered evidence. The government had seized millions from the criminal networks and allocated a portion to victim services. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. She's here, Minjun said quietly. Naomi turned to see a young woman approaching, Mi-sun, one of the survivors they'd found in that desert warehouse a year ago. She was 23 now, attending community college, working part-time at the foundation's office. She placed a single white rose at the memorial, then bowed deeply. For Jasmine, Mi-sun said in accented English, then in Korean, she would have saved us too if she could. Naomi's throat tightened. She would have. More people arrived, former employees, survivors, families of the victims. The garden filled with quiet conversations and gentle tears. Agent Sarah Chen appeared, out of uniform, and embraced Naomi briefly. You did good, she murmured. Both of you. As the sun set, painting the desert sky in shades of purple and gold, Minjun took Naomi's hand. There's something I need to show you, he said. Inside. She followed him into the nearly completed casino, through halls that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. He led her to the main floor, where the gaming tables were being installed. Table 7 stood in the center, polished and gleaming. "I thought about removing it," Minjun said, "starting completely fresh. But then I realized, this is where everything changed. Where you stopped being invisible. Where I started seeing clearly." He turned to face her fully. "This is where we began." Naomi looked at the table where she'd shattered her own silence, where 3 words in Korean had detonated both their lives. "It's perfect," she said. "A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak." "Always," Minjun agreed, pulling her close. "Always speak. Always fight. Always choose truth." In the empty casino, surrounded by the ghosts of their past and the promise of their future, they stood together. 2 people who had walked through fire and chosen to rebuild rather than burn. The Velvet Lotus reopened on a Friday in March, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Naomi stood at the entrance, watching the crowd gather. Not the usual Vegas opening night spectacle of celebrities and excess, but something quieter, more meaningful. Survivors from the foundation arrived in their finest clothes, many holding hands with family members they'd been reunited with. Former employees who'd lost colleagues in the fire came to honor their memory. Agent Sarah Chen brought half her unit, off-duty and smiling. Even Maya, Jasmine's daughter, was there with her grandmother, wearing a dress the exact shade of white lilies. The memorial plaque gleamed beside the entrance, Jinwoo's name at the top, in memory of Park Jinwoo, hero, father, truth-teller. May we honor his courage by building a world where justice prevails. Naomi traced the letters with her fingertips, blinking back tears. "We did it, Dad," she whispered. "We finished what you started." Inside, the casino was transformed. Gone were the dark corners and shadowed alcoves. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in natural light. The decor was elegant but warm, whites and golds instead of blacks and reds. Every gaming table had a panic button for dealers. Security cameras were clearly visible, their feeds monitored by an independent oversight board. The employee break room was larger than some apartments, with comfortable furniture and a wall dedicated to workers' rights information. Naomi. Minjun appeared at her elbow, looking nervous in a way that made her smile. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, but his hands were restless. "Can you meet me at table 7? I need to show you something." She raised an eyebrow. "Right now? We have 300 guests. They can wait." His intensity made her pulse quicken. "Please." Table 7 sat in the center of the main floor, just as it always had. But now it was surrounded by people Naomi loved, Mi-sun and the other survivors, Agent Chen, Maya and her grandmother, even some of Minjun's people who'd helped with the purge. They formed a loose circle, all watching with knowing smiles. "What's going on?" Naomi asked, suspicion and hope warring in her chest. Minjun took her hand, led her to the exact spot where she'd stood a year and a half ago, balancing a tray of drinks and swallowing her rage. Where she'd heard him call her a slur in Korean and decided, in that split second, that silence was no longer survival. "This is where everything changed," Minjun said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Where you said 3 words that destroyed my world and rebuilt it into something better." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small velvet box. "Where the bravest woman I've ever met refused to be invisible anymore." Naomi's breath caught. Minjun dropped to one knee, and the casino erupted in gasps and murmurs. He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light like a promise. "Narangurja," he said in Korean, his voice rough with emotion. "Marry me." The language that had once been their battlefield was now their bridge. Naomi felt tears streaming down her face, for Jinwoo, for Jasmine, for all the pain that had led to this impossible moment of joy. "Say it in English," she demanded, smiling through her tears. "So everyone understands. Marry me, Naomi Rivers." Minjun's eyes were bright. "Marry me and let's spend the rest of our lives proving that truth is stronger than violence, that love can grow in the darkest soil, and that some cycles, the bad ones, the ones that eat people alive, can actually be broken. Naomi pulled him to his feet, kissed him hard while 300 people cheered. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his and whispered 3 words of her own. "I do, bastard." The wedding was small, held in the memorial garden 2 weeks later. Maya served as flower girl, scattering white lilies on the path. Misun read a poem in Korean about new beginnings. Agent Chun officiated, somehow managing to make federal law sound romantic. But the moment Naomi remembered most came at the end, when she and Minjun planted the final flower in Jinwoo's garden together, a cherry blossom tree, its branches still bare but full of promise. "He'd like this," Minjun said, patting down the soil. "New life from old roots." "He'd like you," Naomi corrected, squeezing his hand. "Eventually, after making you suffer appropriately." "I deserve that." "You do." She kissed him, soft and certain. "But you're also trying. That's what matters. That you're trying to be better than what made you." As the sun set over the desert, the cherry tree stood as proof that some things could bloom even in the harshest landscapes. That truth, however painful, was worth fighting for. And that 3 words, whether spoken in anger, in love, or in hope, could change everything. The casino behind them glowed with honest light. The garden around them breathed with life.